Some breaking news to get to here on day 3 of 2023 NFL free agency, and it's something that we thought could happen last week on Friday once the Eagles granted Darius Slay permission to seek a trade. They weren't able to come to an agreement on a contract extension as Darius Slay was set to enter the final year of his contract at 32 years old with the cap hit of $26.1 million. So now Philadelphia is going to release the former All-Pro and multi-time Pro Bowler. He is set to become a free agent when the new league year starts this afternoon on Wednesday at 4 o'clock Eastern time. Obviously, with that $26.1 million cap hit, a lot of people are expecting and anticipating that the Eagles are going to be able to save a lot of money and use that money elsewhere to maybe sign CJ Gardner-Johnson to a contract extension. That's everything that I've been hearing, is that they're working diligently, Howie Roseman in this front office, to bring back Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Here's the issue, though. A contract restructure will probably have to take place today with the player like Lane Johnson, because this move for Darius Slay will be a post-June 1 designation cut. What that means is that the Eagles are going to save $17 million for this upcoming 2023 NFL season, but they cannot use that money until after June 1. So a lot of that money is going to be used for future draft picks that they select in the 2023 NFL draft, and another roster move like, let's say, a potential Jalen Hurts contract extension. Before we dive into this, I want to see where this fan base is at, because Darius Slay is one of the top cornerbacks in the NFL, an All-Pro, a team captain, and in a couple of seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles has emerged as a great player with this organization, but also a team leader. So to lose him, this secondary and this defense suffers yet another hit for a defense that's had a lot of turnover this offseason. So today's poll question is this. Chime in, Philly Bulls. Do you like the move to cut Darius Slay? Let us know in the comment section. Type L for like or D for dislike. What I think this means for the Eagles right now, according to reports and everybody who I've reached out to, the Eagles are working really hard to retain CJ Gardner-Johnson. And I was thinking about this when I woke up this morning. There are a lot of teams who love Chauncey Gardner-Johnson because he can thrive and flourish at slot nickel corner. He can also play deep safety. His first season playing safety, he tied for the NFL league high with 6 interceptions. He's a dog. He can bring the boom. I think he's an underrated tackler. He played good football this year at an all-pro caliber level, in my opinion. There are a lot of teams who want to use him as a chess piece, like Malcolm Jenkins back in the day, who really could line up anywhere on the field. And that's how CJ Gardner-Johnson can be utilized. So for a player to have that much demand and not sign anywhere yet tells me that Howie Roseman and this front office are working very hard to try to bring him back and clear some money to do so. What this also means by releasing Darius Slay is that James Bradberry, who the Eagles re-signed yesterday, is going to be cornerback number 1. And then lastly, the Birds are equipped with 2 picks in the first round in the NFL draft later in April. 10th overall and 30th overall. So I think the Eagles are going to use one of those draft selections on a corner who's going to come at a minimal price tag as compared to Darius Slay. And by bringing back James Bradberry, hopefully CJ Gardner-Johnson, you start to groom and develop a young stud cornerback who you're not going to pay a lot of money to. That is smart when it comes down to a team-building strategy perspective, and I believe that's going to be the plan for the Eagles. What's interesting and of note is that this organization has not used a first-round selection on a cornerback since Lito Shepherd in the early 2000s out of Florida. As for Darius Slay's contract, when he becomes a free agent, everything resets. Back in 2020, after the Eagles traded for him in that acquisition with the Detroit Lions, he signed a 3-year, $50 million contract. That came out to an average annual cost of $16.5 million. If he were to be on the Eagles this year, under this deal, it would come at a base salary of $17 million and a cap hit of $26.1 million. In 2024, he was set to become an unrestricted free agent. Now he'll become an unrestricted free agent, and he can sign a new deal with the team elsewhere. Slay was not a second-team All-Pro like his teammate, James Bradberry, this past year. But you saw what he's capable of, for instance, in Week 3, against the Minnesota Vikings, or was it week 2? Early on in the season, regardless, when he put the clamps on Justin Jefferson. Darius Slay is a prototypical number 1 cornerback in this league who can play lockdown coverage. You can put him on an island, and you don't really have to worry about him. Whereas James Bradberry, I believe, is better suited as a 1B or a number 2 corner, a guy who can sit back in that zone and play with really good instincts and anticipatory skills. Now, as you saw with the numbers this past year, Darius Slay was fantastic. And in losing him, it is not going to be easy to replace his leadership, to replace his play, to replace his lockdown ability. But this Eagles offense pretty much returns almost everybody from last year. And the Eagles, I think, in this front office and with this coaching staff are expecting this Eagles offense and Jalen Hurts to take yet another step. So they might have to outscore and outgun a lot of teams this year, and they might be looking at this defense that finished top 10 in multiple defensive categories this past year in 2022. As you look at the Eagles cornerback depth chart and say, look, we gave up all these points to the Kansas City Chiefs with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Javon Hargrave, TJ Edwards, Kaiser White, James Bradberry, Darius Slay. We might have to just outscore teams now and change our defensive philosophy a little bit and spread out that spending and change things just a tad. At the end of the day, by releasing Darius Slay, this is a risky move for the Philadelphia Eagles. Last year, the Eagles had one of the best cornerback duos in the NFL, and now they're not going to. I expect them to be active in the free agency market. If they're not, they're definitely going to be active in the NFL draft in trying to replace Slay with the young stud cornerback. Make sure you subscribe to the show here on Philadelphia Eagles Now, because when breaking news happens, we bring the heat, we dissect it. Our analysis, we go deeper than anybody out there, and we're approaching 50,000 subscribers here on Eagles Now as the largest independently run Eagles channel on YouTube. We're 7,523 people away from 50K, so subscribe for daily shows on the Birds. Darius Slay taking to Twitter to say this, saying his goodbyes. Now, he tweeted this out, and then the report started to come out that the Eagles were going to release him. Nothing but love, Philly. Let's see where we're heading next. And then that led to a flurry of reports coming out that Slay was going to be released, and that move will be made official at 4 o'clock Eastern time. The big question now, where do the Eagles go from here? There are a couple of really good cornerbacks in this draft class. Luckily for Philadelphia, it is a deep defensive back draft. These are some players who could be available at number 10. And in the instance of Cam Smith and Keely Ringo, those players could be available at number 30. I'm not convinced that the Eagles are going to stay put at 10th overall and 30th overall. They could trade up for a player who they really like. They could also trade back to compile more draft capital. Devin Witherspoon out of Illinois, one of the top-ranked corners this past year in college football. He's getting a lot of Darius Slay comps. So if you want to replace Slay, you can bring in a player who's very similar to Slay. Didn't work out at the NFL scouting combine because of a couple of injuries, but he's a dog. Cam Smith ran faster than a lot of people were anticipating at the NFL scouting combine. Checked in at about a 4.4 40-yard dash. Did suffer from a couple of injuries while at South Carolina, but is physical, long arms, and is a very instinctual player. Christian Gonzalez by far is the most freaky athlete among these cornerbacks on your screen. He has great speed. 4.3, 4.4 40-yard dash, 6'1", 197 pounds, really long arms so he can jam some of these big, taller, physical jump ball wide receivers at the line of scrimmage, but he has the speed to go step for step with some of the faster wide receivers. He's an excellent tackler as well out in the open field. I think that's where Darius Slay was somewhat underrated in that category. Really good movement with his hips. He can guard big wide receivers, small wide receivers, and those aforementioned long arms to jam at the line of scrimmage. I happen to really like Joey Porter Jr. For me, my pro comp is Richard Sherman because he's tall, he's long, He's physical, swagger. His father, great linebacker for the Pittsburgh Steelers back in the day. At Penn State, I thought that he was really good. 254 coverage snaps, 0 touchdowns allowed. Some people tried to tell me he doesn't have ball instincts. How is that the case? When in 254 coverage snaps, he gives up 0 touchdowns, a passer rating of 59, and forces 10 incompletions. And then Keely Ringo is a guy who ran like a track star, a burner at the NFL Scouting Combine, could be available at number 30, but because of how he tested athletically, maybe he sneaks into the 20s because we know teams like to take swings on athletes like that. If you have faith that Howie Roseman and this organization know what they're doing and that they can get this right, because I don't believe this team is as good as they were to end the year, I want you to hit that thumbs up icon and like the video. So we just talked about the draft corners who I really like, who can be taken at some point in the first round. How about the top free agent corners who are still available? Marcus Peters, 30 years old, obviously has a lot of pedigree and a good resume to his name, certainly has some swagger, sometimes too much confidence. William Jackson, a lot of people familiar with him because he played good football with the Washington Commanders, but after he was released, didn't play with the Pittsburgh Steelers after they signed him because of a lot of injuries. Rock Ya-Sin is a player who I'd like the Eagles to look at. Temple University's own guy who is physical, has some pretty good speed. You're not going to have to pay him all that much money. Trey Flowers is also a free agent. I like Sean Murphy-Bunting a lot, former Tampa Bay Buccaneer who could cash in a little bit, but not going to be as expensive as James Bradbury or Darius Slay. Then a couple more corners here on the right of your screen. Greedy Williams was a healthy scratch oftentimes for Cleveland, but can this organization maximize him and develop him a little bit? Maybe. Shaquille Griffin signed a big deal a couple of years ago with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was released by the Jags and Doug Peterson during the offseason and the early goings of it. I'd be willing to take a swing on him. And then Bradley Roby, Eli Apple, a couple more players who the Eagles could look at for cheap. Maybe in, that Patrick Robinson type of range in terms of the contract. And then Ronald Darby, former Eagle who won a Super Bowl 52 with this organization, failed his physical with the Denver Broncos, so he is not being retained either. So with that, let's ask you this. Who should the Eagles sign and or draft at corner? I want you to drop me a name or names down below in the comment section. Let us know down below.